why don't we get started? Welcome everyone to the February 13th, 2025 meeting of Lane Regional Air Protection Agency. We're meeting by Zoom today due to the icy weather and things. So anyway, better to be safe than out on the roads right now. Anyway, thanks everyone for taking time to be on our call and meeting today. First thing, I guess, Heather, do you want to call the roll? Is Heather
Yes,
on?
Chair.
Yep.
Chair Saxon,
Here.
Vice Chair Lovell,
Here.
Director Cutchin,
Here.
Director Hensley,
Here.
Director Keating,
Here.
Director Johnston,
Here.
Director Plummer,
Here.
Director Settlemeyer, Director Stout.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Chair.
Okay, great. Looks like everyone's able to join us today. That's good to see. Next thing, are there any adjustments to the agenda that was distributed? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. I'd like now to invite any members of the public who wish to speak or provide comments on an item on today's agenda. Time is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Heather, are there any members of the public that are on the call that has raised their hand that'd like to comment on today's agenda?
No, Chair, there is not.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on a topic not on today's agenda? Heather, again, is there anyone on today?
No, Chair, there is not.
Okay, then the record will show that no members of the public were on today to comment on any agenda item or items in general. Are there any comments from board members today? Go ahead,
Director
Don.
Plummer.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to flag, it had come to my attention that there's some reports of a strong chemically kind of cologne smell in the 35th and Donald area. Someone emailed me about it, and then I also seen reports on the internet. They linked to a Reddit post about that. So I just wanted to uplift that. Those are folks in my neighborhood in South Eugene, and so just wanted to highlight there's a potential concern about, I think, VOC pollution. And I'll forward that email along, but I just wanted to take a moment to highlight it here.
Okay. All right. Thanks for bringing that to our attention and going through the process of maybe filing a complaint or something. Any other comments from board members? Okay, seeing none, we'll move along. Next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from January 9th. We'll do that one first. That was our regular board meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from January 9th.
Chair, I move to approve the minutes of January 9th, 2025.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Jared. Is there any discussion, corrections, or comments on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Raise your hand.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you. Next is our minutes from the January 30th work session. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Anyone?
Got it. Yeah, Chair, sorry, I couldn't get my button in time. I move to approve those minutes from the January meeting as well.
Thank you.
Second.
There's a second. Are there any comments or corrections? Councilor Keating.
Mr. Chair, I was absent that meeting as I was on bereavement. My mom had passed away on the 21st. should I abstain from passing said minutes?
I would think so. I don't know what the public body protocol is, but I guess since you weren't there, you weren't available to. I mean, you weren't participating in the meeting, so.
Out of an abundance of caution, I'll abstain.
Okay. Thank you. And before we vote, extend condolences to the loss of your mother.
Thank you.
Okay. Were there any comments or corrections on the January 30th minutes? Seeing none, call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, they pass. Thank you. I'd like to now call on Christina to give us an update on the financial report and audit update, please.
Awesome, thank you. First, we'll talk about the financial update with the financial statement from December 31st of 2024. And at this time, we are on schedule to be able to spend up to 50% of our budget if you're 50% of the year has passed. And you'll notice that there's only one line item or one category that we are over the 50%, and that's capital outlay, which is to be expected. We're just incurring those costs as they occur. They're not going to be spread out evenly over the course of the year. But even knowing that the capital outlay on the general fund is over the 50%, we're still on track to stay within budget in that category for the year. So I have highlighted it red just to stay consistent with the formatting of the report, but I don't see any reason for alarm on that. The categories that are highlighted in yellow are getting close to the 50% mark, but not quite over. They're just areas that we want to keep a closer eye on, which you will see when we talk in just a few minutes about our supplemental budget proposal. You'll see that we're addressing those issues that are in yellow through the supplemental budget later. So there are some footnotes. I have 3 footnotes now on here. The first one is a carry forward footnote that has been on the financial statement and will continue to be on the financial statement. It's just to remind you that the indirect cost rate that we're drawing down from our grants in the grant fund are going to be transferred periodically to the general fund. In previous years, we have waited to do that until the end of the fiscal year, and I have started doing that as we do those drawdowns. So you'll see those numbers be reflected on this report over the months. And then the second footnote is payment requests for all federally funded grants are being processed bi-weekly beginning 1/28 of 25 in an effort to keep our reimbursements as current as possible. This reduces our financial risk in the event that funding is frozen at the federal level. So we're taking some steps to just reduce our financial risk by increasing the frequency that we're doing those drawdowns. And then the third footnote is just recapping what I already spoke about with the capital outlay being over the 50% mark currently. So I'll open it up now for any questions from the board about the December financials.
Any questions from anybody? Christine, I think it's a very smart move on the seeking reimbursement on the EPA grant funds, given the whole uncertainty right now on federally funded grants. So I think, as I said, that's a really smart move to reduce financial risk and not have too much encumbered with the possibility of not getting paid in a timely manner.
Yeah, thank you. We just want to keep things rolling and smooth as possible. So that's what we're trying to do. So I guess at this time we're ready to see if we want to approve the financial update.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the financial update as presented?
Chair, I'd like to move approval of the financial update as presented, please.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor of approving the financial update, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Christina, on the financial report. And do you want to give us an update on the audit?
Yes, I'm actually pleased to tell you that there's a better update than what the staff report includes. When we were prepping the board materials, the staff report was absolutely accurate in that we had not made any more forward progress. But since that, this week we've made tremendous progress on our ability to do the audit. We were able to close our books finally for fiscal year 24. We resolved all the issues that we were having with the onboarding of Cassell, and we've gotten all the opening balances set correctly that were initially set up as placeholders. We've gotten everything corrected and we are ready to do the audit. I've reached out to the auditors and they're working on a new timeline to get us through the audit as quickly as possible. The unfortunate timing is that they are now in full swing for their heavy season for just tax season for the Eisler CPA. So as all CPA firms are in their busy season for tax season. So that will make it more challenging for them to proceed quickly with our audit, but they do have us on their priority list and they are working out a new timeline for completing tasks for the audit. They are going to try their best to get us completed by our deadline of March 31st, but they were honest that there is that is a really tight deadline and they're not positive that we'll be able to complete by then. But we're going to make every effort to do that. In light of the expectation that this is a really tight turnaround at this point, I did ask them what are the consequences if we miss the 3/31 deadline, and what they've reassured me there is no financial consequence. However, if we are late with filing our audit with the state, there is the potential that we would be included on sort of, I don't remember what they call it, but sort of the naughty list, I'll call it. We're already on that list because we missed the deadline last year. So what is required when you're on this list is that it's a deeper dive is required on our single audit. So the standard for the audit, if you're compliant with all of your deadlines, is I think it's a 40% look at the items within your governmental grants that you're doing a single audit on. And if you're on the bad list, then you have a 60% deep dive. So it's just, you're under a little bit more scrutiny if you're not compliant with meeting the deadlines. But that is the only consequence. There's no other thing that we would face for missing that deadline. So like I said, we're going to try our best to stay within the deadline and get our audit completed by March 31st. But in the event that we do not get it completed in time, we'll just remain on the list that we're already on because we've already been late before. So you remain on the list for 5 years. Once you've had 5 timely audit reports, then you get off the list. So we're already on the list and we will just stay on the list for an additional year. So I'm excited that we got to close the books. I'm excited that we're starting on the audit or restarting on the audit. And I will be very excited to tell you the next update because there will be progress by the time we meet again. Any questions about the audit update?
Yeah, Travis, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Saxon. I just want to make mention of my appreciation and thanks and commendation to Christina and the finance team, so Robbie and Carissa, who have been engaged in this work for a very long time. We moved into Cassell, and essentially the floor that we put into Cassell with the data wasn't as level of a floor as we would have liked. And then challenges just with our ongoing transition created additional things that needed to be untied, essentially. So it's been a long, hard work with them. Christina as well with Eric, who's our CPA, on making these improvements and getting our floor sort of re-leveled and set. And with that now the case and our monthly reconciliations essentially up to date, I am pleased to, this is the most I feel like LRAPA's financial house has been in order in a long while. So I'm very thankful to Christina and her team for helping it to bring us to this point.
Thank you so much, Travis.
Any other questions of Christina on the audit status? Okay, thank you, Christina, for that. I guess we can now move on to item 7, supplemental budget. Christina, go ahead and introduce
Okay.
that, please.
There is a staff report that talks about the supplemental budget. Basically, what we're asking to do is we're not asking to increase the overall budget at all. We are asking to move a portion of the contingency fund into the administration areas of the general fund. So currently, the way the budget was approved, we have 190,000 in contingency. And what we have determined is we would like to move 160 of that thousand into other line items. And so if you look at the update section of the staff report, it tells you the line items that we would like to increase. Travis and I did an analysis of the budget and spending to date, and we projected expenses that were coming up, and it revealed to us that we needed to change the following line items within the general budget. We won't be making any recommendations to change any line items in any of the other funds, just the general budget or the general fund. So the personnel services in the salaries line item, we need to add $20,000 to that budget, which will cover the unexpected expenses related to staff turnover, such as severance pay and vacation buyouts when one of our staff members leaves. So far this year, we've incurred more in that line item than we had anticipated when we did the budget. And then we also would like to move an additional 20,000 into the building maintenance line item, which is because we had to replace the roof. And the roof was more expensive than 20,000, but our budget is our existing budget is able to absorb most of the cost, but we do need to add 20,000 to that line item. And then capital outlay. Capital monitoring equipment, we would like to add $120,000 to the budget for purchase of equipment for DEQ, and then they reimburse LRAPA for each of these purchases through an existing grant agreement. So this was just an oversight when we created the budget. We did not have a full understanding of what was going to be asked of us from DEQ related to that grant. So the revenue will be there to support it. It's reimbursable, but we do need to reflect it in the budget. And then the last little bullet point talks about we would like to subtract the 160 from the general contingency and move it up to the items that I just discussed. Just to talk about the financial impact, just to reiterate, we are changing the overall budget $0. So there's no increase to the overall budget. We're just reallocating the 160,000 from the contingency to the line items that I just described. With that, we'll leave 30,000 in the contingency line item that we don't think we need to move just yet. And I don't anticipate we will need to move it, but if something were to come up during the rest of this year, we do have the ability to then do another supplemental budget and move that if we need to. There is a chart or a table on page 2 that describes the change. There's a column for the currently adopted budget and then a column for the changes that are proposed, and the final column shows you the ending result of each of those changes, and you'll see the bottom line for total appropriations stays the same. It's our recommendation that the board of directors would approve the supplemental budget as I've described and is described in this staff report. And we did draft a resolution for your consideration, and that was included in your board packet as well. The resolution describes the statutes that kind of govern our supplemental budget process, and then it summarizes the requests that we're making today. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Chair, I do have a question. Do you want me to hold it till after the motion, or you want me to ask it now?
I think probably best is let's go ahead and see if we have a motion and a second, and we can open up to questions and comments.
Chair, I move approval of the supplemental budget resolution 25-01 as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovell. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, second. Okay, Brian, do you have a question, comment?
Yes, I do. Just back to the capital outlay transfer of the 120. So do I understand that we'll get that 120 back from DEQ on a reimbursable basis?
Yes.
And do you expect that this year or next year?
If we make the purchases this year, it will be reimbursed this year. As a side note, as we all are reevaluating our financial status in the wake of the executive orders and things that revolve around federal funding, DEQ is also tightening the belt and being more conservative than usual just to try to manage the risk. And so it may be possible that they decide not to move forward with purchasing the equipment, in which case we would not use this budget line item and we would not get reimbursed because we wouldn't make the purchase. But the original plan before the federal funding freeze issues started to arise, the initial plan was to spend this amount and for us to get reimbursed, and the grant is already in place. It's not a new grant, it's an existing grant. But like I said, they may actually decide not to proceed because of the funding freezes that are happening around the nation, but it is in the plan to make these purchases. So we want to be prepared with our budget to be accurate.
Yeah, and Christina, has that revenue from DEQ already been recognized in our budget, or will we have to do another budget if we get it this year, but supplemental?
The way I understand it, if you have additional revenue coming in, you don't have to do a supplemental budget to reflect that. The only areas you have to stay on top of with supplemental budgets are the expenditures. But we do have the grant reflected on our revenue. Not at the level that we would end up getting reimbursed if we do spend these funds. So we would bring in more than what the budget says. It would look that way.
Sounds good. Thanks, Christina.
You're welcome.
Alan?
Yes, Christina, great. It's very, very clear. I love the clarity. Wonderful. So just two questions, mostly for context for me, on our contingency budget overall, that 190, that percentage of, let's call it operations, is that usually sufficient year over year to cover most contingencies that come up?
I know that it was sufficient last year. The same kind of scenario happened last year where the only supplemental budget we passed was to move the contingency into other line items. However, as you know, with last year's budget, towards the very end of the year, we did end up going over in a couple of categories, and we should have passed another supplemental budget. But I was unaware you could do multiple supplemental budgets at that time. So that was a failing on my part for sure. But typically it has been enough. I haven't really looked back over the years to see if that stands true, but it's definitely in the recent past has stood true. The 30,000 that we're leaving in the contingency was actually planned to be sort of a PERS contingency in case we had extra spending we needed to do with PERS, but we won't need to tap into it for PERS at all. I can tell that with very much confidence. So.
And then, if I may, Chair, just one small item as well is when we're doing a capital expenditure that we're waiting to be reimbursed for, just so I understand, because I obviously I don't see the balance sheet here. I just see the the budget items. Is there enough cash on hand to cover those expenditures as we're waiting to be reimbursed?
Yes, that's a great question. We actually have a very healthy reserves account that provides us with more than 6 months reserves. So we have that. That's part of the answer to that question. The other part is kind of more of a cash flow question, which we have most of our reserves are in our LGIP investment account, but our cash flow, we currently have more than $1 million in our checking account, which is part of our reserves as well, but that is kind of the level that the checking account has been in for about the last 6 months. So we spend and we receive and it fluctuates, but it has been staying healthy at right around $1 million in our checking account. So without having to sell any of our investments, we definitely have plenty of cash flow to cover these expenses.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I guess we're ready for the question. The motion and second is to approve the supplemental budget per the, I can find my thing here, per the resolution 25-01. So I'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All opposed? Aye. Okay, passes. Thank you all. And thank you, Christine, for that very thorough explanation of that. That's very helpful to the board.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess next thing I'm going to turn it over to Travis. We have our elections for chair and vice chair for 2025. So Travis, do you want to proceed?
Yes, thank you, Chair Howard, Chair Saxon. Also, Christina, just as a note, your audio is a little bit choppy there. I don't know if that's because you're on the browser version of Zoom. If you have the actual Zoom program on your computer, maybe hopping off and get on there could help with some of the choppiness we have. So just want to make a note there. But on to the share my screen here again. Staff report for the annual appointments. So in that staff report, this time of year in February, we elect the chair and the vice chair for LRAPA's governing body of the board. The responsibilities as described here essentially come down to the chair has the majority of the sweat equity, if you will, engaging with myself, kind of in between board meetings, taking phone calls, having conversations, helping to direct and set the agendas. And then providing that leadership during the board meetings of running the meeting. The vice chair level of responsibilities are really kind of secondary to the board chair if the chair is ever absent for some need or reason, such as helping to review and approve the agendas as they are set, as well as assuming the leadership of directing the board meetings in the chair's absence. Also provided was not as long of a historical analysis of the chair and vice chair roles that was provided in the staff report in the January month when the board met, but this is since 2020, mostly to point out or to note that we have had years recurring in a row where the chair and the vice chair have remained the same. Also, by general practice, the board has taken an approach, typically, but not always, where the vice chair then is elected into the chair position, and then a new vice chair role is established. That is the tradition that has been followed for the most part, but that certainly is not something that's written into any bylaws or any titles or anything along those lines. And as discussion has seemed to have been over the last few months, that there has been general agreement, I would say, of continuing with Howard as chair and David Lovell as vice chair. But this is the opportunity to assess and make any decisions or changes. Chair Saxon.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I now open up for nominations for chair of the board of directors. Michael.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Howard as chair of board of directors.
I'd second that.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Oh, come on.
You do a really good job, Howard. You move us forward.
Yeah.
Well, hearing no other nominations, we'll close for nominations, and I guess it's appropriate. All in favor of appointing Howard Saxon, myself, as chair for 2025, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, well, thank you for the vote of confidence, and appreciate all your support, and look forward to another productive year. Little campaign speech here, but I think we've had gone through a lot of turmoil and a lot of challenges this last year. So I think we're all hopeful for smooth sailing this year, and focus on the mission of LRAPA. And now that we have some of these challenges behind us, and I sure am looking forward to we'll have a report later, but meeting in our new reconfigured office. Jared.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I wanted to keep you in there. It seems like, just like you said, we had some ups and downs, but it feels like as a whole, we're just starting to hit our stride here and see the future in front of us now that we've got a full group again. I think we have one more spot, but I like where we're going, and I just want to keep it the same moving forward for right now. So
Yeah, thank you. Me too. Travis?
Yes, thanks, Chair Saxon. I'll just make mention that I too have appreciated, Howard, the time, which for all the board continues to be volunteer time, but you've been helpful and patient with me, and some of your background experience of working with some of the federal grants and engaged on federal air regulatory items have, I think, been good overlap and alignment. And I just appreciated the hearing me kind of talk about all the things I'm working on, and then the helpful suggestions of where I could focus some time and effort and energy. So I just want to express my appreciation.
Well, thank you. I wasn't retired and looking for a job, I would have you as a reference, but Commissioner Lovell.
Thank you, Chair. I will hold off on presenting the gold watch and gavel then. Yeah, we certainly appreciate the direction we're going, and I would echo the words of Board Member Jared, who said that I think we've scooped up a lot of debris, and we're heading forward in a really great direction. And I think we have a really good culture of a cohesive group, and I'm actually pretty excited that we have a chair that's not only invested in the mission, but also has some skin in the game. So I appreciate you. Thank you very much for leading us.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments. We now need to move on to selecting a vice chair. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. And I echo my colleagues' sentiments in regards to your leadership. You have been a steady hand for this organization, so I express my gratitude. And with that, I'd like to continue the steady team of Commissioner Lovall at your side as your vice chair, and I would nominate the commissioner if he'll accept the nomination.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Seeing none, we'll close the floor to nominations and we'll call the vote to appoint Commissioner Lovell as vice chair. All in favor, say aye.
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 All
Aye.
opposed? Okay, thank you. And thank you, David, for volunteering for another year. I know you have a full plate as chair of the county commission, and I appreciate you making time to serve LRAPA. So
Well, I
thank you.
appreciate you guys' help. Like I said, we got a good group. We can't lead well without good peeps. So I'm glad we got a good team. So thank you again. And yes, answer the commissioners or counselors' questions. I will accept.
Great. Well, thank you all. All right. Well, so keep moving along here so I don't lose your faith in having a good tight meeting that gets finished on time. So thank you again. Next item on the agenda is to appoint members to the Budget Committee and budget officers. So Travis, would you like to go ahead and introduce this topic, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair Saxon. I will start by saying that the LRAPA Budget Committee makes up not only just Budget Committee members, but also the Board of Directors. So it is an 18-panel committee, of which the board each has a sort of counterpart, you could say, on the Budget Committee. The last few years, we have had some ongoing vacancies on the Budget Committee. I see LRAPA as an organization or an entity that can provide some assistance in trying to identify and help plug in some future or potential citizen advisor or budget committee members. Through my own kind of personal professional networks, I tried to court a couple people up to the task. Unfortunately, I failed in doing that. I will say, though, that Oak Ridge, we have two new positions or applications for the Budget Committee. The first being from Oak Ridge, Thaddeus Carter, who Mayor Cutchin at Oak Ridge presented as someone who could be a good addition to the committee. He is a program manager for our home heating upgrades program, working with the nonprofit South Willamette Solutions in Oak Ridge. He has a lot of oversight of that program, and I think has a good stake in our budget committee, and he has been nominated for the Oak Ridge position. There is another candidate to be considered as well to be added to the budget committee, which is Zach Mulholland. He was with the Lane Community College Board of Education and the Eugene Budget Committee, is a by contract environmental policy researcher with the nonprofit Beyond Toxics, and has a bachelor's of science in physical and political science with public planning minor from the University of Oregon. I've been engaged with Zach over the last few months as I've engaged with Beyond Toxics on a number of issues, and I think that he could be another good, valuable perspective to bring to the budget committee. I should back up a little bit, I guess, in terms of who is currently on the committee. We have Adam Rue representing Eugene. His term expires in February 2026 next year. And then Paul Metzler for Lane County. His term also expires in February of 2026. We do have 5 open positions on the budget committee in total. With these 2 new applicants, that's just 5 that are still vacant. And so long as we have more than 9 members of the budget committee, we are in quorum. So even with those vacancies, I am not worrying that we will not have quorum for the budget committee meetings coming up next month and the following month. But recognizing here that more time and effort and energy is needed between now and next year in getting prepared for a more full seat of a budget committee for our 2026 season. So I'll stop there for questions, comment, and action by the board.
Look, Chair, I think you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Are there any questions, comments? Dylan?
Yeah, just would like to quickly voice my strong support for Zach Mulholland. I've spoke to him personally about joining the budget committee. I think he'd be an excellent fit and is really familiar with the work that LRAPA is doing in Eugene and across Lane County.
David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So also on this memo, I want to make sure I'm clear too, the expiring terms of Mr. Schmonk, Ms. Lenholz, and Ms. Kenyon. Are we also, are they a 2-year extension, and have they agreed to that, or where are we at with that, just out of curiosity?
Oh, yes, those are, I will actually turn to Heather. She reached out to them and connect with them. My belief is that they are planning on returning for this year, but Heather will have more of that direct line. Heather, do you recall what their responses were in our outreach?
Yes, Travis and Chair Saxon, Vice Chair Lovell, they both have agreed to return and be on the committee.
Great. Thank you. I'll just add, I know Zach, he and I both served a number of years on the City of Eugene Sustainability Commission, and he's been really good to work with, so has some familiarity with him. Are there any other questions, comments? I guess
Just one question I have for Heather. Did
yeah.
Dawn Kenyon say she would serve another 2 years, Heather?
No, I thought you were, well, let me just double check. I'm so sorry. Let me just go to my
No,
notes really quick.
my understanding is she's not going to continue.
Right, let me just double check my notes.
Okay.
That's my understanding as well, Director Cutchin, that Dawn is not able to continue, and Thaddeus's appointment in replacement was timely and apt.
Okay, thank you.
You are correct. That is correct.
So if there's a motion, it would be to appoint Zach Mulholland and Thaddeus Carter, and then we would also be reappointing Steve Schmuck and Ruth Lindholtz. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Just want to clarify that. So I'll entertain a motion to reappoint Steve Schmuck and Ruth Lindholtz and fill 2 vacancies, appointing Thaddeus Carter and Zach Mulholland.
Chair, I move to appoint Thaddeus Carter and Zach Mulholland to their respective positions on the Budget Committee, and to reappoint Ruth Lindholz, Vice Chair, and Steve Schmonk, Ruth Lindholz, Chair, and Steve Schmonk, Vice Chair, back to their respective positions and extensions.
Second.
Okay. There's been a second. Any further discussion? Okay, if not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. Partner dues approval. Travis, do you want to go ahead and lead the discussion on this?
May I interject?
Yes.
I think we need to also set the budget officer as I think as myself, but I think we have to go through that process. Am I thinking correctly?
Christina, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. That is something that was not on my radar until you mentioned it just right now, and that is something that we need to do and should have added to the staff report. But you are correct. We do need to appoint a budget officer as we begin our budget committee. Last year, that was myself as the budget officer. Historically, LRAPA has taken the finance manager to be appointed as that budget officer. Christina, I believe that I would be confident in your ability to hold on to that role this year, but I think Chair Saxon, Commissioner Lovell, either myself or Christina Ward as an appointment to the budget officer for this budget season is needed, and either of those appointments I think would be appropriate. Thank you, Christina.
Michael, you had a question?
Yeah, I did have my question was if we have someone who is potentially interested in this, if it's possible to have the board approve them prior to the March meeting, which I believe would be the first budget committee meeting. I think that's how we did it last year, but we'd just like some clarification on that.
Last year, what happened at the March meeting was the only reason I know is that the March meeting happened before my first day on staff. And so I was elected to be the budget officer at that meeting before I was actually on staff, because I was going to be presenting the budget to the board. So I think you might be correct that last year we did that during March.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Christina, my question was not clear. I was asking about if there is someone who is potentially interested in being appointed to the board. It's a separate question from the budget
Oh,
officer.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry for the confusion there, but essentially what I'm asking is if between now and the first meeting we find someone else who is interested, is it possible to add them for this cycle, or is that door closed now?
No,
I'm pretty sure.
we can add them.
Okay,
Yeah, I
thank
think,
you.
Michael, since you and I started every meeting, we've had a conversation on if somebody has somebody who's interested for budget committee to bring them forward. So I think if we
Yeah.
can find that person,
Yeah.
we just need to bring them to the table.
I've certainly tried.
Commissioner Lovell.
Thank you.
Thank
for the
you, Chair.
clarification.
I'm just wondering procedurally about selecting the budget officer at this meeting, if we would be better off tabling this until the next meeting when we can publicly notice it. That's just my red flag of ethics just kind of waved a little bit. I was going to wave that in with the crowd. What do you think?
I think it's typed on the agenda as appoint budget committee members and budget officer, but we just didn't have the detail in the staff report necessarily. So I don't know if that has been publicly notified that we are doing that because it's on the agenda. I'm not sure about that.
Well, you may be right. If it's on the agenda and it was noticed, I think we'd be okay with that. So that's good. Thanks for pointing that out.
Chair Saxon, I'll offer that it would be pretty easy for the board to briefly convene before the start of the budget meeting to, if there's any new budget committee members to appoint, or if at the time, just for the sake of assuring we're not crossing any noticing requirements, it'd be possible to do the budget officer then as well. And also, this was very much my mistake. It was not on my radar or my thoughts until just now. So I need to hold accountability to myself for the circumstance we're in at the moment.
No pizza for you next meeting.
Brian?
Well, I was going to make a motion, but over to you, Chair, if you want to hold off.
Okay, well, is everyone comfortable with, I mean, we just voted to reappoint the chair and vice chair. Is everybody comfortable with that, or do we need to, if you will, vote again and to retract that decision and defer to the budget committee election of officers at the meeting? I can't remember historically what we've done there. Travis?
Specifically for chair and vice chair?
Yes.
Chair Saxon, the chair and vice chair roles for the budget committee is one of the first items on the agenda for the budget committee meeting. So the current chair and vice chair exists from last season's meetings. As we head into March, that is a question that will be reestablished with the budget committee, as well as any of those new appointees. So for that structure of the chair vice chair, that is still a procedural thing we do on the first meeting of the budget committee per season.
Okay. All right. So we don't need to do anything.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we now, based on a discussion, need to appoint a budget officer for this year's cycle. So I'd entertain a motion for an appointment as budget officer.
Chair, I'll nominate Christina Ward for the budget officer for preparation of the 25-26 budget.
Second.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lovell. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of appointing Christina Ward as budget officer for this budget cycle, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that procedural thing up so that we're all in compliance.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now we can move on to partner dues.
Yeah, I will go ahead and start this one, Chair Saxon, and then Christina, as you can fill in the details behind me as needed, I would appreciate that. So one of the items that we talked about and discussed during the January work session was the partner dues calculation methodology. Every year, the board, a to-do for the board, according to our intergovernmental agreement with our partners, is to establish what the partner dues will be for the upcoming fiscal year. As talked about in the work session, the IGA describes sort of the timing and the process of it, which is not a lot of structure or formalism that's established in that IGA and leaves it up to the board to determine as will. Something that would be helpful or useful to LRAPA is to establish more of a formula approach for our dues determination process, which allows myself and the organization to engage with our partners a little bit earlier in the year ahead of their budget processes. The city of Springfield came forward with a proposal to base that formula on the average increase in property tax assessments. During the work session, the board engaged on how that might compare to CPI, and a direction that was provided to staff was to have some comparison of how CPI and the average increase of property tax assessment has varied over the last few years. So there are 5 data points there: 2025, 2020, 2015, 2010, and 2005. And generally, the CPI has been lower than the average increase in property tax assessments, which you can see there ranging from a half percentage point up to about a third of a percentage point. Property tax increase having a much broader variation to that. Another component too is it's more difficult to assess or to get what those average increase in property assessments are, as where the CPI is more uniform and established statewide. The green table you see here below, this is the calculation methodology that was used for fiscal year 25, which is the population rate multiplied by the cost per person, which you also see there to amount in the dues. In blue is some of the scenarios that can be considered, and the formula is the base cost per person multiplied by the percentage of the CPI changed, and that equals what that new cost per person will look like. And then we take that new cost per person and we multiply it by the current partner population count to arrive at a fiscal year 26 due. This table here below or the blue table shows that with a CPI of 2024 utilized. The orange table below shows that difference utilizing the change in property taxes assessed. Christine and I sat down and looked at the difference between the two, and we feel that for the kind of putting ourselves in the perspective of our partners, we think that the CPI change is likely to be a more agreeable approach and formula to use for the long term than otherwise. But that is something that is before the board to decide and discuss and to provide that direction. I'll also make mention that there is no specified formula in our IGA, and it is up to the board to adjust and tweak at will. So I will stop there and be open to any questions, comments, or directions. Thank you, Howard.
I do have a quick addition to what you said. Just wanted to point out next to the orange table, I used the self-reported change in property taxes assessed for Springfield, but I did not. And I'm noticing that I cut off the column that tells you which partner I'm talking about, but it's in the same order as the green table with City of Eugene, City of Springfield, then Cottage Grove, then Oak Ridge, and then Lane County. I just accidentally copy and paste error. I didn't include which partner is which on the blue and the orange table, but they are in the same order as the green. So back to the property tax assessment rate change. I was unable to find a good source for that information for each of the partners individually. So I used the self-reported number from Springfield, and I used the Lane County number for everybody else. I could find the property tax information for Lane County pretty easily, but it was very difficult to find for each of the cities and whatnot. So I think that's also something that should be considered if we do decide to use the property tax assessment. We are going to have to let those partners self-report, and it will be hard for me to verify the number that they give me because it's just not readily available online.
Okay, Alan?
Yes. First, I want to say thank you for doing the work to compare the two different things, the CPI versus the reported property tax assessments. I think this is great. It's nice to see them so close. And because they're so close, I don't want to say it doesn't make a difference, but I don't think we'll have any trouble with asking for our partners for the gentle and subtle rate increases going forward. So that I think, yeah, the closeness there is great. And if it saves you staff time to come up with a credible number, then I am for saving staff time.
Thank you. It's also important to kind of look at the numbers over time. It is very close this year, but in previous years, like in 2020, there was a almost 11% increase on those property tax assessments. Part of that is due to increased property values, but also increases in, legislated tax increases in general. So there are some years that the property tax assessments would have been a much bigger jump than this current year that we're looking at.
Okay. Is there a motion on this topic as far as the methodology to assess partner dues?
Chair, I move to approve the partner dues methodology as described in the recommendations section of the staff report, partner dues from February 13th, 2025.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second to adopt the staff recommendation for partner dues. Is there any further discussion or questions?
I do have a question, Howard. Christina, what's your recommendation for the sort of start and end date to calculate CPI if we go that route?
What I used to determine the number, I chose the 2.9. I used the calendar year 2024 CPI. That was the most recent kind of year snapshot summary that I could find. So I think that the most consistent way would be when we're starting to evaluate the partner dues for the next fiscal year, we just use the most complete recent calendar year. That way, if there are some anomalies in a month or whatever, like we've had some anomalies this week with the CPI this month, just because of the change in the White House. But if we use the full prior calendar year, it's just a more stable number, I think.
Yeah, I agree, and it informs your budget process as well. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councilor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. It might not make sense as much sense budget-wise, but values-wise, I wonder if staff could enlighten me if there's ever been any conversation about rolling back partner dues for municipalities that are taking actions to reduce emissions. If there are municipalities that are working in close partnership with LRAPA in regards to our shared mission and shared values, what, if any, conversations have there been about pausing or rolling back dues and perhaps even increasing dues for communities that don't take certain actions? So less population driven or even, yeah. I'll pause there. I'd love to hear your feedback, and I think it warrants a larger conversation about our partnering municipalities and partnering municipalities and our county partner, and what what, if any, in a carrot and stick, or what carrot and stick approach could be explored to relieve the dues burden and encourage actions that benefit the entire community.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're kind of thinking along the lines of like a credit to your dues for certain actions or certain investments. My first gut reaction to that is it would be very difficult to sort of establish a fair, uniform way to apply that across all the different partners because there's so many variables. For instance, Eugene has a bigger population and therefore has a bigger budget for the city of Eugene and may have more capacity to do some of these types of efforts that we would like to see them doing. Whereas a much smaller community like the city of Oak Ridge, they don't really have it within their budget to invest impactful amounts of dollars towards any particular effort. So I think it's an intriguing idea. I think it would be very, very difficult to apply uniformly across all the partners and fairly across all the partners. That's just my first gut reaction. I don't think we've ever really had that be a topic of conversation in the past, but I'm not sure about that. But I do know that in 2008, we did do a huge cut to all the partner dues because of the economy at that time kind of warranting that. But that was a cut across all the partners and not necessarily one over another,
Right. I appreciate the perspective. Thank you. As mentioned, and I don't know if it's not an agenda item today, but I do think that it would be in this agency's best interest to explore some creative ways to encourage or incent behavior across the board. Thanks.
Travis?
Thank you, Chair Saxon, and thanks, Councillor Keating, for that comment. I'll say that in response to the reflection, because I can understand where that's coming from, of how can we set up a structure or a process by which, if the goal is to reduce air pollution and those who are proactive and embracing that need, should there be a system or structure that incentivizes that approach versus those who might not be as forward-looking and marching in that direction, some structure that provides more incentive for them to consider that. I would say on the topic of the partner dues in general, the structure that we receive and we leverage the partner dues is to receive federal funding under Section 105 of the Clean Air Act, which is our base grant. And that base grant is focused or charges LRAPA to do the work of implementing the Clean Air Act, which is designed to assure that all the regions are meeting the national ambient air quality standards. So for Lane County and really all of Oregon, will be established that all of the national ambient air quality standards are being met, and what further sort of effort or actions are needed by our partners to assure that those NACs are met or being maintained. We're at that point, and we use those partner dues to leverage that funding from the Section 105 base grant. And reducing those partner dues to any degree jeopardizes our ability to leverage our local funding to continue to receive what amounts to being about $300,000 in federal support a year. And if we lose some of that local support, then that could jeopardize that ongoing yearly contribution from federal dollars. So I would be hesitant in wanting to explore a direction that takes away some of our ability to leverage those dollars to continue to receive that significant federal funding.
It might be a future discussion, maybe doing some research to see if there are other air quality agencies such as LRAPA that has kind of a partner dues funding, at least for part of their program, and how those costs are allocated. I think there'd be some challenges on how you allocate dues based on, say, mission levels or what, because that could change drastically. If there was a large industry that moved into West Eugene that was maybe just combustion sources or something, no big industrial process. I don't know, how would you allocate that? So anyway, there's some challenges. It is an intriguing idea, though, but maybe for a future discussion. Any other comments or questions? We have a motion that's been seconded to adopt the staff recommendation for partner dues allocations. So if there's no further discussion, call for the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. And thank you, Travis and Christina, for the memo that you put together. It was very helpful in understanding historically how we've allocated partner dues.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda are board goals. Travis, would you like to discuss this, please?
Chair Howard, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to talk about the goals, which I'm really excited to have, hopefully them be agreeable to the board and have them be set. In the work session, we went through the board goals at a little bit more of a finer tooth comb. I did expedite a little bit of the end of it as we were running out of time. But an outcome feedback that I heard from the board was essentially a SWOT analysis, which is a strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats summary for the organization in light of these goals. Would be really appreciative. So this staff report was my work of going through that process and making that assessment. I'll kind of summarize at a higher level the information that's in here, but on the strength side of things, it could be boiled down to that as Oregon's only local air agency. One of our big strengths is maintaining relationships with our community partners. We have strong financial position with good reserves, and our operations are efficient with some low permit backlog. We have some experienced technical staff and a track record of that service from that technical staff in building community trust. And I think over the last number of years, we've continued to leverage and build that community trust further. On the weakness side of things, some of our big challenges center around workforce development as well as retention. We have seen some recent staff transitions in the last month, particularly in permitting, which is going to require some investment in training as we bring in new staff who most likely may not have a familiarity of our work implementing the Clean Air Act from a regulatory perspective. Part of that challenge is some of our permit writers that left us, they went to the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality as our compensation package was not quite as competitive as what DEQ was. So that is something that I think LRAPA needs to reflect on and focus of what is our compensation approach and how can we make ourselves more competitive so we don't become a structure where LRAPA as a small organization is a training ground, so to speak, for other organizations to then capitalize on our equity that we've put into the training and the staff that we just want to retain and have long-term careers with LRAPA. We have a number of staff who have been with us for 18, 25, 30 years, and that's been a resource for us. And so how strategically can we assure that new members of our organization are also interested in staying with us for that long, I think is something we need to focus on. On the opportunity side of thing, there's a few paths going forward, strengthening our existing partnerships to explore new program alignment. One of the benefits, I think, of LRAPA is bringing down those state levers of government to the local level. We have more of an opportunity to have working relationships with the regulated community, more of an opportunity to engage with our municipal partners and help whoever it may be navigate the federal air regulatory environment that exists. Local authority does position us to have more of a tailored solution for emerging air quality challenges, wildfire, smoke, and notification on air quality is an example. And we have an opportunity to modernize a lot of our internal structure. We internally, some of our data processes and databases are old, still kind of in the late 90s, early 2000s, and upgrading those to more efficient and effective programs is a good opportunity for us. On the threat side of things, we have a few challenges, which is an evolving federal regulatory landscape, continuing to see increased climate impacts such as wildfires, as well as budget pressures from our partners. And then emphasizing again, facing continued competition for experienced personnel from other agencies in the private sector, as well as the public sector. And then how this connects to our goals. The strengths is really how we, as a local agency, can have more time, effort, and energy to put into our local relationships and understanding what the local need is and to pivot accordingly. Some of our accelerated goals connection is using some of our financial strength that we have to up our competition in terms of compensation package, as well as to find opportunities to leverage new partnerships when it comes to wildfire mitigation and approaches there to reduce the amount of fuels that can burn and then create air quality issues later in the year when it's dry, like July, August, and October. So that's the SWOT analysis of the goals. The following pages are those goals as proposed again, but I will stop and take questions, comment, or direction.
Any comments or questions from anybody? Travis, these goals, these are the same ones, I guess, that we discussed at our work session. Is that correct?
That is correct.
One thing that I thought we had discussed that I was interested in seeing was at a minimum some timeline on when some of these would be accomplished, and what the metrics would be. And I don't see that in this at all, unless I'm missing something. And I thought we also, because there's a lot of goals here, that we would also try to at least do some prioritization of some of these. Can you comment on that?
Yes, Howard, that I guess is a misconfusion or understanding that I had in terms of, I mean, I recall the discussion on the metrics and that is a space in a misalignment there. On the prioritization, that too, misunderstanding in my direction that was provided to me in not able to meet or to provide any specificity, I think, in the detailed level that would be desired here at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, personally, I don't know what others think, but I'd be interested in seeing some of that, because there are a lot of goals here, and I know some are ongoing, but I know it would seem like it'd be helpful to you to also, and staff, to understand what you need to really work on first and foremost, and some of the other things are important, but obviously some take priority.
Yes, Howard, I understand that and could be prepared to, again, take that step and more fully and completely bring that back before the board.
Dylan?
I guess, yeah, I'm curious. So we need to approve these goals, correct? At some point?
There is no need or any, I think, requirement of the board to do these goals. This is merely a request from myself as the director in getting to a place where I fully understand what the board is looking for, myself and LRAPA as an organization, so I can assure that I'm heading in the direction the board would like to go. And the sense at this point is, I think the ideas are all agreeable, but the metrics and the timeline to meeting these goals, I think, could be fleshed out further.
Yeah, and so I guess my kind of thought would be, if there was a middle ground between Howard's point about wanting more kind of granularity in some of the prioritization and timelines, and just like giving you, Travis, the direction that you need, by maybe we could approve the goals and then hope for maybe a quarterly report that brings back prioritization, timelines, things like that, so that we can give kind of the immediate clarity on the broad direction, and then be kind of having an ongoing conversation about prioritization. So that'd be something that would work for me, but just throwing it out there so we're not kind of continuously kicking the can down the road on just giving final approval on the general direction, which I think there's general agreement on that I've heard.
Thank you, Director Palmer. I'll just respond really quickly to just to provide context. So for the board, from what my intent is, once the board approves some goals, is to take the director's report and give it a revision that is based by these goals in terms of the director report will follow each of those goals and then have the data and the metrics within it of how we are meeting those goals or working towards them. But I think having that timeline or the KPI component to it that can be added as a comparable in that director's report would be helpful in assuring that we're making progress and achieving it.
Brian?
Yeah, I recall the discussion we had during the work session about like a balanced scorecard type of approach to measurement. And, I think as a board, we do, accept these high level goals. And then as Travis and Dylan have both alluded to, develop those metrics and the scorecard to measure that going forward, have them bring that back to the board.
Yeah, since I raised the question, I certainly agree with what you're saying, Brian and Dylan. I think the goals are good. I think there's just that one additional component. I think that would be helpful not only to you, Travis, but also, for us as a board to understand, progress and things like that.
And Chair Saxon, I want to make clear that I agree with that perspective, and I do think that some metrics is healthy and needed, and regret that it was just an oversight on my part of not having those items ready for today.
Not a problem, and that will take some work, and it's only been a couple of weeks since we met on these, so anyway. So I guess if it doesn't require necessarily a formal approval, but I guess it's just a consensus, is everyone comfortable with the goals that have been presented, and with the understanding that Travis, you and staff will come up with, I guess, some prioritization, metrics, schedule, and keep the board apprised on progress on some of these, and we can have further discussions as needed on them. Is that agreeable with everyone? Okay, it sounds good. I see a lot of head
Do we need a
nods.
formal motion to table the conversation until later? Since an action is asked for on the agenda.
Yeah, I don't know, what's the consensus of the board, how you want to proceed on this? Do we need to approve these goals? Is that how everybody wants to proceed?
I would suggest maybe we make a staff request by the board to come back with the refined goals for an action item.
Okay. Does that sound agreeable to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Sure.
I think we can just, I don't know if we need a motion or not. We can just, our direction, I guess, to Travis and staff is to do that.
Yeah, it's like a head nod thing.
Yep. Okay. All right. If everybody's okay with that, then I think we'll move forward. And Travis, I know you and I have had some discussions. I know that you and Brian have had some discussions about balanced score sheet as a possible approach, and so I definitely encourage you to reach out and whatever assistance get on that.
I appreciate Chair Sachs and the board the refinement and opportunity to bring this back before the board again.
Okay. All right. Sounds great. Okay, thank you. It's a good discussion. Let's go ahead and move forward to the Citizens Advisory Committee. Jim, are you on board?
I am.
Great. Well, welcome, and we look forward to hearing your report.
So we met in late January, and we're excited to have an applicant to fill the general public seat on the committee. And so the application is in the board packet for Michael Koivula, and the committee unanimously voted to recommend his appointment to you. So that would be an action item for you guys. Shall I keep going or you want to address that now?
Why don't you go ahead and keep going, and then we'll undertake the action item.
The other thing that we did was wrap up our analysis of the results from the permitted source survey. And so there's an executive summary that I wrote in the board packet, and then there's a separate, more detailed report that Kelly Wood put together. And it compared some of those results with the previous survey from 2022. So if you have any questions on that, you can let me know. For the next meeting, we will have election of chair and vice chair. Since I expect to be retired at the end of the year and move out of the area, I will not stand for election this year, so that we have some time for a transition. And let's see, the other topic for next month will be taking a look at enforcement data and opportunities to communicate about enforcement actions.
Jim, do you want to just give us a few highlights on the survey?
Sure. So in general, there was fewer people filled out the survey. In terms of overall satisfaction with staff, we had 88% this year that were satisfied or very satisfied, compared to 22 when that was 75%. As far as timeliness, there was a bit of a slip there, which would appear to be due to some of the staff turnover. And we had a number of comments with respondents asking about a more of a proactive and cooperative relationship with LRAPA in terms of interpreting and keeping up with permits. That's my nutshell analysis.
Okay. Before we take action on the appointment, are there any questions of Jim on his report? Okay, well, thank you, Jim, and thank you for doing the permit holder survey. I think that's always very valuable to get feedback, certainly anonymously, from your customers, from the customers of LRAPA. So I appreciate the advisory committee taking on that task. So before us is an application for an appointment to the Citizen Advisory Committee for Michael Kulavula. Is there a motion to appoint him to the advisory committee?
I move approval and appointment to Michael Kavoya for the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Jared. Is there any discussion? Okay, if not, call for the motion vote. All in favor of the appointment, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, it's approved. Jim, thank you for your report, and we look forward to Michael being on the advisory committee. And thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Chair
well,
Saxon.
yes, sir.
I just wanted to also throw in a thank you to Jim. I know that he's leaving. I know that he's moving on, but all of the information that he provides to us every time he comes to a meeting has been very thorough, and he seems to do a great job. So I think that's going to be a hard seat to fill once he moves on.
Yeah. But you're not gone yet, are you, Jim? Right?
Not yet.
Well, this will be my last report to you.
This will be?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I didn't know that. I thought it wasn't that imminent. So I, as chair, I'd like to definitely second what Jared is saying. And, I appreciate your service to LRAPA. It has been very, very valuable. And you've been, I think very diligent and really engaged with the board, and it definitely is very appreciative of you doing that. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks to the board.
Jim, will you miss us as much as we will miss you while you're in Tahiti?
Oh, probably more.
Are you moving somewhere warm?
Idaho Falls. I think they
Oh,
were
that's
-3
colder.
this morning.
That's cold.
I've done work up there in winter. It's not fun.
Yeah.
Good luck. All right. Thank you. Thanks again, Jim. Next item on the agenda is the EJG2G grant. I don't know if I'm allowed to say environmental justice anymore, but go ahead, Travis.
Yes, thanks, Chair Howard, members of the board. Let me share my screen again so we can go through this. So I'll start off by updating the board on things programmatically for us that has kept us busy since we've seen some of the federal actions that have been taken by the new federal administrator. The sense coming down from that federal perspective is that prior funding under the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is being scrutinized, and potentially an interest in ending or removing or pulling back some of the terms and conditions that were awarded. LRAPA has an environmental justice government to government grant for just under $1 million. We have that terms and conditions agreement in hand, and we have been moving forward with that project, which does essentially expands on the Oak Ridge Air project of Homewood heating interventions up in the Oak Ridge area. This has more of those home interventions, but a little bit more of a smoke proofing and wildfire defense perspective. There's some funding to a local nonprofit in Oak Ridge, South Willamette Solutions, for about $293,000 and change over the life of this grant of 3 years. Some of that also is going to supporting the yard debris program at Oak Ridge that SWS will be helping to assist. There's also $30,000 going to Lane County Public Health for a health and morbidity study that's being done. And all of this work has been placed on pause as of January 29th, 2025, when LRAPA's ability to access what's called ASAP, which is our portal that we log in to receive reimbursement for costs incurred under this grant. As that became no longer accessible to us, and seeing some of the federal actions that were taking place, I made the decision to pause all work on this grant and then bring this before the board to see if that pause is something that the board wishes to be upheld, or if, because we have the terms and conditions with the federal government to do this work, we move forward on that. I engaged with Howard on this, and he asked some information that I bring to the board that could be helpful in deciding what LRAPA may do in this circumstance. And he asked for what a cost would be over like about a 3-month period. Well, really the question that Howard asked was, what's the burn rate? And as the program is new and getting established, that's really a hard thing to set at this point in time because of its newness. So instead, a lookout 3 months from now about how much money do we anticipate being billed under this grant. And that total amount comes out to being just under about $200,000, which would be continuing with SWS. We have a RFP that is currently paused that we could move forward to as well to bring on a contractor to help with some of the work under this, as well as continue forward on engagement with Lane County Public Health and the health and morbidity assessment. So a 3-month look out, I think a guess of what that financial cost could be billed to this grant is just a little under $200,000. At the moment, we do have access to our ASAP drawdown portal. We have collected invoices from all of our partners, and we have been fully reimbursed for this grant. So at this point in time, we have $0 that we still need to collect on. And so the question comes before the board of moving forward with this grant. What is that threshold of financial risk that the board is agreeable to us taking as we continue this work? Or if there's some other idea or consideration that we might assess in deciding how to move forward on this. So that's the context I want to present before this discussion, and I will stop and be open to any comments, questions, or directions. Thank you, Howard.
Travis, I assume there's a EPA project manager. Have you had any conversations with them, or is that person still employed? I mean, just because kind of a chaotic situation from my perspective, are we able to get any guidance at all from EPA?
Yes, that's a great question, Director Saxon. And initially, all of our meetings with the EPA on this grant, we had reoccurring meetings. They were canceled with our grant specialist. However, this Monday, our grant specialist was able to meet with us again. She checked in with myself, Christina Ward, and Matt Sorensen. And there was no direction or guidance that was offered from the EPA at that point in time. The direction provided to her was to not offer any direction, but she was still plugged in. We were unsure if her position was one that was going to be lost or otherwise, but at the moment she was still engaged and able to assist, but did not have any direction one way or the other for us.
I did, during that meeting, I did ask if there were any timelines that were already kind of set by the EPA on how long we would be able to continue to access our ASAP drawdown. It had been suspended for a little bit, and then they lifted the suspension. So I directly asked, was there a timeline for when it might be suspended again? And she said that there was no current plan to resuspend the grant. But as we know, that landscape is changing on a daily basis between what's put forth in an executive order from the president versus what the court, the judges are challenging those executive orders. So I believe from the EPA's standpoint, they're getting updated legal advice from their legal team. And so that may change on any given day, right? So, but for now, there are no immediate plans to suspend our funding through ASAP currently.
Travis, I know there's other agencies or whatever that have received these grants. It might be worthwhile to reach out to some of them to see what their strategy is. And I guess the main thing I would fear is that LRAPA encumbers some costs either directly or through subs, and then all of a sudden, you're not able to, especially for the subs, to pay them, and then we're kind of on a hook. So I think that's a risk, and I don't know how you judge, whether it's much of a risk or not.
Chair Saxon, I appreciate that. And I'll say that I'm in connection with not necessarily grantees specifically, but involved in networks who actually are using federal dollars to provide technical assistance on these grants. The networks and the loops that I'm plugged in on, some of the guidance from that perspective has been to continue on with the grant if you have a terms and conditions in place, and any question on reimbursement for that is really a follow-up question that can be sorted, but the contract exists and is in place, and therefore you should pursue the contract and commit to that contract. With our I think an approach that could be healthy is just more regular updates with the board and looking back at how accessible has the ASAP portal been, how well have we been able to reach that drawdown, and then what kind of potential monetary dollar amounts in potential incurred costs that we haven't been reimbursed for. Is there a line or a limit where if we hit that point, then we would pause all activities again? But until we get to that point, let's just continue forward with the work as contracted. That seems to be the general kind of consensus or advice that's being shared in those circles.
Okay. Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Travis. Is there a is there I guess, a soft cost to pausing and being cautious? Meaning, like, do we risk partners walking away and no longer being available if we resume later? I mean, I know you noted in here that one of the I can't find it now, but one of the partners indicated a willingness to resume.
Yeah,
But
I can elaborate more on that, Director Johnston. The For LRAPA, we are continuing to bill to this grant regardless of the status of the ASAP drawdown, just in the administrative costs of kind of keeping terms with this. Um, I think that for South Willamette solution, this pause could be pretty significant in the sense that our federal grant funding is supporting FTEs that the nonprofit has to implement Oak Ridge Air. A component of this grant as well is more support for the yard debris program in Oak Ridge. And I think the pausing in that degree could create challenges for those partners. And two, there also is the reflection that we have a terms and conditions where LRAPA as an organization has committed to doing this work. And under Congress, the funds that were passed through IRA must be expended in that 3-year grant window. So there's no opportunity to extend this grant. So any pause that we have today could create a circumstance where we are running into a hard deadline and unable to fully expend down or commit all the dollars that have been awarded under this grant. And that could be an unfortunate circumstance as well.
yeah, that's a good point. Okay, and then I guess just to be so I'm clear, Travis, there's not an action item here. This is informational. Is that right?
Yes, the at the moment the grant work is paused, and because moving forward with it would incur a financial risk to the organization, and that's where I felt a discussion with the board was warranted before any further action is needed. I do think that moving forward with the grant, if the board is agreeable to it, is something that can be helpful if consensus is there, and then perhaps some monetary dollar of incurred or potential financial costs that we can be attentive to if we get up to that point, then that could be another opportunity to reassess pausing the work or otherwise.
Thank you. Helpful.
Dylan?
Christina, did you have like a direct response to anything that was just said?
Yes.
Please just go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to add on the soft risks that if we continue the pause and it results in us not being able to meet the goals of the grant. So when we requested the money in the application, we said this is how many homes we are going to help improve and kind of the metrics for evaluating whether the work was successful or not. So if we miss those goals, regardless of whether we spent all the money or not, it will impact the ability to pursue future like grants, because if we have a history of not achieving the goals in a grant, that just reflects poorly on future funding opportunities. So I wanted to also kind of mention that as a consideration of whether to keep on pause or just forge ahead.
Thank you, Christina. It's a great point.
Anything else, Dylan?
Yeah, I would just like to voice my opinion that I think that we should forge ahead and like Travis was saying, potentially set like a bar where we maybe are gonna like reevaluate once we've spent a certain amount, and we're financially liable for whatever X amount that we decide. But I think it's important that we're continuing to move forward, especially because we do have the terms and agreements of the grant. And based on my understanding of some of the legal analysis being done right now around some of these programs, that it's very unlikely that that money will be able to be clawed back once it's been obligated to local governments.
Well, I'll just weigh in, Travis. I think there's some risks there, but even if the grant was terminated, I think they could do that. But you would be allowed to invoice any costs, reimbursable costs up to that termination date. I can't imagine they could terminate retroactively. Commissioner Lovell?
Yeah, I don't have anything really constructive or educational other than the fact that the Navy SEALs used to say, if anything's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. Mediocrity is for cowards. So I'm kind of in the press on mode.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I know the stress that the sub is under, the South Willamette Solutions, and how tenuous that is. So I'd recommend moving forward, but also recommend a really conservative feedback loop as to how we're doing on every session that we have get together.
Thank you. Michael?
That was just going to be my request, is that kind of until further notice, we include this as an agenda item.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
which
right.
I'm sure Travis was going to do anyways. So
Okay, well, there was not an action item, but I think, Travis, I think you kind of have a good sense of, where the board is on this. And I know you and Christina are monitoring it very carefully too, so.
Yeah, I'll
Maybe.
follow up outcomes once Dylan's.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
and sorry, one more point, just voicing, this program is obviously super important to our work as an agency. And so also maybe just emphasizing, like, if
Yeah.
there is a potential to look at diversifying funding to support this kind of in the meantime while there's this uncertainty. But obviously this is like got to be a continued priority whether or not this funding continues to exist. So just appreciate everybody's thoughts on moving forward.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Dylan. All right, anything else on this?
Yeah,
May
so
I-
they,
I was just going to say, may I ask one more question? Is there a sort of dollar amount that the board would recommend we not exceed as far as our threshold for forging ahead? What I mean is, Travis mentioned that over the next 3 months, we would probably see expenses around $200,000. And of course, along the way during that 3 months, we're going to be doing drawdowns. So I don't anticipate that we will ever have a moment where we have 200,000 due to us that we can't pull down. But I just was wondering if there was any guidance from the board on like a threshold that we should make sure we're not exceeding.
Hey, so long as they're paying the bills, I think, I don't know, it seems like there's not a lot of risk there. I don't think the government can just not pay, reimbursable expenses. It doesn't work. In normal times, it doesn't work that way. I mean, they can terminate the contract for cause or convenience. But I think, if you have outstanding costs up until that point, the government's still obligated to pay. At least that's been my experience when I was doing federal work. Brian?
Yeah, I would just recommend limiting outstanding reimbursements to 25% of the total grant.
Okay, that's the kind of thing that I was looking for, that kind of feedback. So the entire grant is 1 million, so 25% would be 250,000. So that seems like it would easily fit within kind of our projections that we're expecting. So,
Michael?
yeah, I think that sounds like good guidance from Brian. And I also think just the fact that we're going to be discussing this at every upcoming meeting, kind of until further notice, I think makes me comfortable with it. That if that number changes significantly, we can revise. But I think that's good. I think that's good guidance from Brian.
Okay. Anything else on this? Okay, thank you. Well, we'll move on maybe to a little more pleasant updates on the remodel. So, Lance?
Sure. Thanks, Chair Saxon and Vice Chair and board members. Hopefully, this is a little more happy place information and a little more optimistic. As you can see in the staff report, we're still on track with our remodel project. We're currently about 1% over the approved contract for the project due to some change orders and other things that have occurred. And I don't predict that will go much above that. I'm pretty confident we'll be less than 2% over the contract sum, even with some upcoming change orders that haven't gone through the whole process yet. Just due to, we're nearing the end of the project and noticing things here and there that we missed, and so or that need slight modifications. Since the staff report has been put together, we've actually had further completion of some of the projects. All the flooring is installed now. The lighting was an issue. We were worried that some of the major lighting that we needed in the main lighting area in the main part of the building wasn't going to show up on time, but all that lighting was delivered at the beginning of this week and has begun to be installed. And so that issue has resolved itself, thankfully. They're currently in the main throes of installing all the kind of the low voltage networking cabling and AV support equipment, and that will hopefully be done by the end of next week or a little longer. And once the main lighting in the main building section is installed, they'll be able to install kind of the workstations that are in that main area. Most of the main work has been done. It's really, Travis and I were there yesterday for a construction meeting, and it's almost looking like you could move in, although we know we can't because there's things that still need to be done. But we did confirm with the contractor that we're still on track, and currently we have a scheduled move-in date of March 5th. So all things going as planned, the next board meeting can be at the main office. I'm sure you'll still see a few boxes unpacked in corners and stuff, but we'll be able to, those that can meet in person and get an in-person progress update and see how things have been accomplished and done there. I see Travis showing some of the pictures here online, and it's too bad we don't have some from yesterday up there, because you'd see even more progress. So I think that the things that need to be done, as I mentioned, still before we can get an occupancy permit and move in, is the lighting needs to be finished. There's some window blinds that are being installed today, I believe. We have some interior glass and glazing that they put in at the last few things they do, just to help prevent any breakage of that glass when they're doing some construction. But they're down to the point now where they're getting ready to turn on the HVAC system now that there's no more dust and construction type dust being created. They want to keep that clean as possible, but that should be turned on hopefully next week also. And once they get the rest of the lighting in, they can put the final ceiling tiles in, and then they can balance the system, the HVAC system. And then there'll always be a few things here and there that will probably need to be taken care of once we move back in. There was a new front door needs to be installed, and that door, there's some newer pictures. Thanks, Travis. He's thinking on the fly here. The front door has some hardware that still hasn't shown up. They have the door, but not the hardware. So that may or may not happen before we move in, but we don't need that for occupancy permit. The front door that is there now works. It just won't work with the final door entry security system that will be installed. And so I'm fairly confident, 99 point whatever percent sure that we'll be able to be in there on March 5th and have our next board meeting on site.
Any questions from any of the board on this? Well, for a major remodel, I think it's gone remarkably smoothly. So,
yeah, we've been, probably luck has a lot to play into that, but I do appreciate we've had great working relationship with our general contractor, and I appreciate the trust that Travis and other LRAPA staff have put in me to kind of try to move things along. But it's more due to those around me than myself, for sure.
well, anyway, I'm glad it's going well, and main thing is we're pretty close to budget, so that's pretty good too on a remodel. You never know what you get into until you demo. So anyway, I think we've been fortunate. So. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks, Lance. Appreciate the update.
You bet.
And we look forward to meeting face to face next month in our new quarters, hopefully. Okay, Travis, director's report.
Yes, Chair Saxon, Commissioner Lovell, members of the board. I'll share my screen again, and noting the time of 2:05 and technically past the end of the board meeting, I'll kind of skip through some of the standard items here that we have as an ongoing recurring update. I will mention that a lot of the information that is here in these portions of the board director's report will continue to show up, but I envision a remodification of it once the board goals are agreeable with some good metrics associated to it, that this information I think will be presented in more direct comparison to what those goals will be set. I think something that's really worth looking into for the board is this section here of the public events and outreach. I want to appreciate Matt Sorensen for putting in a lot of good extra time, effort, and energy, and not only just updating this, but actually doing the work that is thus described. I have very much appreciated his help in expanding our relationships and networking and helping LRAPA become more on the social consciousness of those who live in Lane County. So really appreciate that. And then the goals that we have here are still set on kind of our last goals and will be adjusted as we have those newer guidance set from the board. And this director's report in total will be modified to more closely align and follow with those goals and the metrics. So I'll kind of leave the board report at that for the sake of time, but I'm happy to answer any questions or direct subject matter that people wanting to elaborate on or explore further in the director's report.
Any questions, anybody?
Nope.
Okay, well, thank you, and we'll digest your report, and if there's any questions, we'll certainly can bring them up next time, and a lot of public outreach, so I think that's very important, and I appreciate you documenting all those activities, for our review and information. That's very helpful. Commissioner Lovell.
Yeah, Chair, just before we adjourned, I just wanted to do an assignment review, just so everyone on the board is clear that the LRAPA staff directed the LRAPA staff to come back to the board with refinement and timelines to the SWOT analysis and the strategic goals.
Yep. So noted. Does anybody have anything else? Well, that concludes our agenda. I went over a little bit, not a good start for the year, but but we had a lot of good stuff to talk about. So anyway, I appreciate everybody's time today. And if there's no further business, we stand adjourned. So thank you, and stay safe out there. And
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Thanks all.
Bye.